seconds away on Studio 5.
Mr. Spell, I'm Thurgood Marshall with the NAACP.
The life of a legendary Supreme Court justice comes to the big screen. And
they just sent over Deja's file.
And?
Her mom's in big trouble.
see why Sterling K. Brown's star rises higher with this performance in Marshall. Plus,
I don't think so. We're on the set of The Wedding Ringer with Jennifer.
Josh Gad adds laughter and bravery to his performance in this incredible film. Studio 5 starts now. And welcome to this special edition of Studio 5. Before we dive into all things Thurgood Marshall, let's begin the countdown of the top 5 headlines in uplifting entertainment news. At number 5.
What took you to Idaho?
Medical conference. Are you a journalist? That would explain the questions.
As The Mountain Between Us rides high at the box office, the author of the book that inspired the film is sharing the faith that inspires him. Charles Martin tells the Gospel Herald his favorite writer is King David, who wrote much of the Psalms. He says, "David speaks what my heart needs to hear when I'm hurting or in a place of uncertainty."
We're not gonna die. Not today.
At number 4.
Country star Jason Aldean opening Saturday Night Live by paying tribute to the victims of the Las Vegas massacre and to late rocker Tom Petty. Aldean was performing at the Las Vegas Music Festival when bullets hit the crowd.
We hurt for you, and we hurt with you. But you can be sure that we're gonna walk through these tough times together every step of the way.
Sunday, Aldean and his wife returned to Las Vegas to spend time with shooting victims, still hospitalized at the University Medical Center. That brings us to number 3 in the countdown, and we will get to that shortly. Right now, it's time to sit down with actor Chadwick Boseman. He's the star of the new film Marshall. Boseman plays the role of Thurgood Marshall before his historic days as the first African-American Supreme Court Justice. Chadwick Boseman is this week's Studio 5 interview.
Thank you, Jake.
What are you thanking me for?
Chadwick Boseman played Jackie Robinson in 42.
Rolling Stones ain't even ever had a hit record yet.
James Brown in Get On Up.
Mr. Spell, I'm Thurgood Marshall with the NAACP.
And now the role of Thurgood Marshall before his rise to become the first African-American justice on the United States Supreme Court.
All of the other biopics that came to me, you know, I turned them down.
She says you raped her and tried to kill her.
She lying.
I'm telling you this up front. The NAACP were not like most lawyers. We only represent innocent people, people accused because of their race. That's our mission. You understand?
One of the unique and beautiful things about this is he has got to defend someone accused of rape and attempted murder, but he can't speak in the courtroom. How do you do that?
Well, that was the question. I mean, for me, reading that he's gagged in the courtroom, at first it was like, well, there's no way I'm doing this because I don't get to talk in the courtroom.
Yeah.
I don't get the big speeches. And at a certain point, as I continued to read, I realized that it was, you know, having your arms, doing a boxing match with your arms tied behind your back and still winning. If you can do that, you're the greatest fighter in the world. So it became the conceit, the obstacle actually to get over. And so it became a conversation of how do I set up the first part of the movie, you know, or everything outside of the courtroom so well so that when we get in the courtroom and I can't speak, that's justified. The hero is established. And then how do I continue to establish the hero not being able to talk? How are we shooting this? What are the nonverbals? What is the interplay? So a lot of that was found when we actually got there. That was improvisational. The subtext and nonverbals was all stuff that Josh and I found, or that I found alone when the camera was just on me. And that's just a great acting exercise. You know, it was something that I knew would be difficult for any actor to pull off.
You do well. I mean, because I know coming into it, I thought, well, Chadwick doesn't look like Thurgood Marshall, but you really become him.
Right.
In my mind, watching it, the timing of this film, set in 1941, we're in 2017, having a conversation about race yet again. How timely do you think this film is?
It's so timely. I mean, and we couldn't even plan it because we wanted it to come out during Obama's White House. You know, I think the producers wanted a White House screening of this movie. The movie wasn't done yet, and we end up now putting the movie out, not knowing that we would be in this time post Charlottesville. You know, dealing with three attempts at changing healthcare, and dealing with the president saying that players can't protest, essentially protesting unfair treatment of African Americans by police. You know, that's essentially what this whole thing started. It's essentially asking Americans to live up to America to live up to its dream, and that's patriotism. So we didn't know that patriotism would be under attack in this way, and that white supremacy, that Charlottesville would have happened, and white supremacy would have such a forefront. And that's, you know, where this movie is. This movie has a backdrop of white supremacy in Germany, and has a forefront of white supremacy in the story. And so we didn't know that this movie would speak to this time period because we planned for it to come out much earlier than this.
Marshall is in American theaters this week. We'll have a more extensive look at the film in just a moment. Still ahead on Studio 5.
The court hides nothing from the people. Nothing.
You've presented a defense that is based completely on lies and deceptions.
Sterling K. Brown moves from prosecutor to defendant in this first film since snagging 2 Emmy Awards. And welcome back to Studio 5. We want to get back to the countdown of this week's best in uplifting entertainment news. At number 3.
I was on that side of the fence.
NBA star Dwayne Wade is cheering his wife Gabrielle Union's courage, tweeting, "My wife is one strong individual."
In the latest issue of People magazine, the BET star is revealing her personal struggle with infertility. The 44-year-old admits over the years she's suffered 9 miscarriages and gone through 8 cycles of IVF.
They still out there? You want to take separate doors? Or
the actress opens up about her struggle in her candid and personal new memoir.
We can use this for good, Justin.
At number 2.
I play Cyrus. He's like a know-it-all kind of camel.
Tyler Perry gives Studio 5 an exclusive first look at the holiday film, The Star.
The new king's in danger.
Run for your life!
Get out of the way! Here's a little well-placed distraction.
It's the story of the first Christmas through the eyes of the animals.
Every year, Christmas becomes a little more commercialized. We get a little more away from why we do this to begin with. And this movie is there to reintroduce the real reason for the season, not only for this generation, but also for the next.
The Star is in theaters November 17th.
Deborah, are you okay?
And that leaves only one more story in the countdown. You'll want to be sure to stick around for that. Sterling K. Brown has added 2 Emmys to his shelf in the last year. Marshall marks his move from the small screen to the big screen. I'd say he is soon to be holding an Oscar as well. See why Sterling K. Brown is this week's Studio 5 one to watch.
Nothing from the people. Nothing.
You've presented a defense that is based completely on lies and deceptions.
Sterling K. Brown's performance as Christopher Darden in The People vs. O.J. earned him an Emmy in 2016.
They just sent over Deja's file.
And?
Her mom's in big trouble.
He adds another trophy to the shelf in 2017 for his performance in the NBC hit series This Is Us. People versus OJ, This Is Us. You seem to be riding a beautiful wave right now.
I am indeed.
Where does this film for you fit in that wonderful wave you're riding?
So I need to know this. Look at me now. Did you do what they said you did?
I never touched that woman.
Okay, Joseph. You got lawyers now.
This is the first film that I've done since OJ and This Is Us. So it's sort of a new foray for me from the small screen to the big screen. And it's exciting. You know, like it's one thing to come into people's homes on a weekly basis, but it's another thing when people, you know, get a babysitter and go out for an evening and hopefully come enjoy a film in the cinema. Yeah.
Were you familiar with this Thurgood Marshall story before coming to this role?
Not at all. It was one that was completely foreign to me, and so I got a chance to get educated in just the research of this particular story and inspired by the example of this young, just how young he was. I think he was 31, something at the time. But he had the chutzpah to go across this country fighting racism with his incredible legal mind. Like, I'm 41 now. I'm like, Brown, you're slipping on your pimping, baby. It's time to get it together, you know?
I tell you.
Yeah.
Some have compared this, even I think the screenwriter compared this to the O.J. Simpson case.
Oh, really?
I'm curious if you see any similarity. You are, of course, the person being defended in this story.
Right.
And you coming from the People versus O.J., do you see any similarities to the case?
That's interesting. Not so much. I think O.J. Simpson was a very particular defendant in that he had celebrity on his side. He was also 2 years after the Rodney King beatings, and so he was dealing with a jury of his peers that were all too ready to see police misconduct as the status quo, right? Whereas in a situation with Joseph Spell, he doesn't have any fame. Nobody knows who he is. He doesn't have any education or access to the greatest legal minds, but he was fortunate enough to have Thurgood Marshall come to his defense. You know, O.J. Simpson had sort of a glowing image of like the epitome of the realization of the American dream.
Yeah.
Joseph Spell looked guilty, not only because of the color of his skin, but because he had gone through a dishonorable discharge and had a wife and children that he had abandoned, had another lover that he also, and now he had entered into this relationship committing adultery with this woman. So he's not a perfect defendant by any stretch of the imagination. But what was appealing for me was that his imperfections do not equate to his guilt. And too often in this country, we can see someone and think that we know who they are and throw, you know, cast them aside as if like, I don't want to bother. But everybody's life matters. Like Joseph Spell's life matters. And you can't just throw this brother away because you don't like the way he looks.
The new season of This Is Us is in full swing on NBC. You can catch Sterling Brown there, and his amazing performance in Marshall hits theaters in America this week. And still to come.
Hi there, it's Chadwick Boseman.
Sterling K. Brown.
And Josh Gad.
Don't move a muscle. Your sneak peek of our new movie, Marshall, is coming now.
I wish you'd have told me that before.
You should have been on the same page.
Josh Gad takes his turn in the Studio 5 hot seat. And welcome back to Studio 5. The wait is over. It's time now for the #1 headline in this week's countdown of the best in uplifting entertainment news. At number 1, Denzel Washington delivers an unforgettable moment away from the big screen.
Denzel Washington is in Chicago looking for directions to a local restaurant. When these people realize who he is, they tell him his 86-year-old superfan lives across the street, so of course, Denzel has to go meet Juanita Hubbard.
Not gonna let him go. That's my mom. She's 87 years old.
87. My mother's 94. I just got off the phone with her. Yeah, 94. This is a blessing. This is a blessing.
It seemed like I knew him. not just to see it in the first time. When I just touched him, it seemed like something just went through me like a spirit. And he was just like someone that I really knew was a good person.
That wraps the countdown and brings us to a much more extensive look at the film Marshall, starring Chadwick Boseman, Sterling K. Brown, and Josh Gad. In fact, we turn to him to guide us through this first look.
NAACP.
Thurgood, you're going to Connecticut.
Joseph Spell, Negro servant attacked socialite in her own bedroom.
This case will show the world if a colored man can get a fair trial in the United States.
There's only 13 million Negroes depending on you.
Don't any of you have any confidence in me? I'd say you have enough confidence for us all.
I need a partner who the jury can relate to.
Sam Friedman. Good to meet you, Sam. Hey, give me a hand with these, would you?
What have you got in here, cement?
Guns. Books, Mr. Friedman.
You just sweep through town, stirring up all kinds of ugliness. My life is on the line here.
Hey, Attorney Friedman, hold on a minute.
What do you want? You're one of us now, Sam. A real fighter.
We see Sam Friedman take this case in this film because he's convinced by a high school friend. But for some reason, I think it's deeper than that. Why do you think he took the case?
I think he took the case because he knows he has to. I think he took the case because despite the two little figures sitting on his shoulders, the one who's saying don't do this, the one who's saying do this, he's always sided with the one who's saying do this. And he's needed that extra push into the abyss. It's scary. It's scary going out and knowing that you're going to publicly have attention drawn to you in a way that will most certainly end with harassment, if not worse. That is a message that is still playing out in this day and age, sadly. And while this movie touches upon many themes, I think for me one of the great themes is alliances, right? This story about two allies. One who is dealing with bigotry and hatred because of the tone of his skin color, and the other who's dealing with bigotry and hatred based on the faith he chooses to practice. But as they both learn, bigotry doesn't choose favorites. It knows no bounds. And so they share this common goal of defending a man who, without their help, will most certainly, face a death penalty.
What was it about the role that attracted you? We're used to going to the theater and you making us laugh. What was it about this dramatic role that appealed to you?
It's just so rich. I mean, it's just so rich. The arc of the character is one that was so wonderfully deep and complex and thrilling as an actor to roll up your sleeves and jump into. You know, I trained as a dramatic actor for 4 years in conservatory and ended up doing comedies, and that was happenstantial. And for me, there is something so wonderful about going back and doing a story like this because it is unexpected for my audience, and I want to keep them on their toes. I think that's important. So whether it's this or my next film, Murder on the Orient Express, it's just about allowing myself to grow, continue to grow, and also for audiences to evolve in the way that they see me. But this movie is, in many ways, a message of hope and inspiration. And that's what I want audiences to leave with it because it's easy to feel hopeless right now. And you as an individual may feel like, what difference am I gonna make? You can make a world of difference if you're willing to have the bravery to go out and try to do so.
This story was held by the Friedman family pretty quietly. Have an opportunity to meet with any of them, speak to any of them?
Not only have I had an opportunity to meet and speak with, Laura Friedman was my great lexicon during this process. She was my encyclopedia because unlike Thurgood Marshall, Sam Friedman's life is not well documented. And so she became my entry point into capturing the essence of that figure, who happened to be her father. And that was a huge part of my process.
Quick reminder for you, Marshall is in American theaters on October 13th. Now that brings us to the time to laugh, and our resident comedian is actually poking a bit of fun at Josh Gad and his impression. Here is Lionel Harris.
You just saw Josh Gad in the last interview, and he's a very funny guy. What a lot of people don't know about Josh is he's also really good at impersonations. Check out this clip.
We're on the set of The Wedding Ringer with Josh. I don't think so. We're on the set of The Wedding Ringer with Jennifer.
You know, that clip was hilarious. Because typically I don't like when white people do impersonations of blacks.
Up next on Studio 5, film director Reginald Hudlin with a lesson we can all learn from the life of Thurgood Marshall. And we are just about out of time for this week's Studio 5 and your first look at the film Marshall. Let's look ahead now to see what we're working on for next week.
But every once in a while, I'd see a shooting star burn across the black sky. Bright one minute, and gone the next. I couldn't understand why I never could see where he went. I think God was giving me a lesson about me, Debbie.
When did you know your life in this picture was a book, was a movie? When did you realize that?
Well, it was actually Denver's idea.
Studio 5 is sitting down with Ron Hall, the man who lived and wrote The Same Kind of Different as Me.
And the words say, God put every stars in heaven and even gave every one of them a name.
And we're bringing you that story next week. But before we say goodbye this week, I'd like to give the final word to the film's director, talking about Marshall. Here is Reginald Hudlin.
I think he should be a hero to all of America. Here's a guy who took the promise of the American Constitution, all men are created equal, and made it real centuries after the fact. You know, using the courts. He said, you know what? This was not written for us, but we're going to use it for us. Sometimes you have to look into the past to see a reflection of who you are now. And that's what I think we have. I think we go, why does this look like today? Why haven't we moved further as a culture? Now, some might say freedom isn't free. And yeah, we won that battle then. So we should take heart when we have to fight again. We have to renew our commitment to freedom, our commitment to justice.
Those are wise words from the man behind Marshall and other films like Django Unchained, House Party, and Burning the Sands. That is also the final word for this edition of Studio 5. Until next time, reach out and touch me at From Graham on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat. And then be sure to come on back and see where Studio 5 takes you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Young people, millennials, are flocking to church.
It's not an exaggeration to say that we love to meet them and that we love to know their stories.